Good afternoon, everybody. We are moving further into the graveyard shift, unfortunately. So I would like for everybody in the audience, and I cannot see you, so I cannot verify you're actually doing this, to just stand up, shake your arms and legs, and do a bit of a wiggle around. I just want to make sure that you're all awake, okay, and you focus. We've got a very important message to share with you this afternoon. Yes, that's it. Okay, I can see that you're awake and you're still strong there. That's good to hear. So this afternoon, we have CARSTEN, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Transnova, CENTURION, President of Riverlogics, and Dr. Alexandros Skandalakis, and apparently they call him Mr. Scandalous for short, so just watch out for his naughty tricks this afternoon. They are going to be talking with us this afternoon about navigating a post-COVID era, building supply chain resilience to minimize future supply chain disruptions. And I don't think that it could be at a better time given everything we've experienced, especially with the rioting and looting and things like that. It's not just post-COVID, it's a lot more at play. So welcome, gentlemen, and we look forward to your presentation.
Great, thank you, Tonya. Appreciate the introduction, and it's a privilege to be here, and thank you to all of you for your interest in today's session. So, yeah, today marks day 517 of our 3-week lockdown. Yeah, 517 days since we first heard the greeting, my fellow South Africans. And if we ever wondered what supply chain disruption meant or how it would feel, well, we stopped wondering. I think we sure know now how that feels. It's impacted us all as in our personal lives, and I've got plenty of bully beef to show for it, as well as in our professional lives. And certainly those of you supply chain practitioners who were involved in essential services delivering, you had to reshape your supply chain and your thinking in terms of how to deliver your goods and services in lockdown environments, getting permits, etc., and that extend right back into your supply chain in terms of getting suppliers of your packaging materials and the likes of that. And unfortunately, for those of you who are not in the essential services, you started doing some deep reflecting in terms of what does the future hold for your business? How do you shrink it down and preserve the core of the business to emerge from this pandemic even stronger and more resilient?
Sorry, Carsten, I just want to jump in here 2 seconds.
Sure.
Carlos and Mr. Scandalous, please can you just mute yourselves until you're going to talk, because we're going to get feedback if your microphone's on.
Good, thanks for that, Tonya. Yeah,
Sorry,
sounds better. Yeah, sounds better. Yeah. So so this last time has been extremely disruptive. I suppose the one good part of it in the last 517 days, what we've all learned and become proficient at is learning to have meetings on Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Blue Jeans, and as of this week, a new platform called Floor. So, if we take a look at the disruptions, not all of the disruptions were directly related to COVID. So it's something that's not been new to supply chains, but it certainly has had a significant impact and brought things to the fore. Other disruptions that have been happening globally are Brexit. I think those people in the UK and the Europe with the UK's trading partners have been figuring out new trading terms, currencies, border restrictions, and the likes of that. Also been plagued by environmental disruptions. Hurricane Delta generates ongoing disruptions within the petrochemical space. And there's been cyber attacks globally on shipping lines as well. And whilst on the topic of shipping lines, who can ever forget the captain of the Evergreen or Ever Given, who so politely parked his vessel sideways in the Suez Canal and disrupted the supply chain down, certainly to us, and making ships having to go the long way around or back up, and that delaying the supply of materials in and out of South Africa and having a push back into the ports and a clogging up effect. Also, other problems are obviously, of course, the two big powerhouses of India and China and the border conflict, and two global trading partners of ours, and how that impacts. And then the natural disasters of flooding in Europe. We've seen a lot of that, and the impact of those disruptions predominantly in the manufacturing sectors. And then again on the fuel side in pipelines. So globally, there's been significant disruption, COVID and other. But us in South Africa, we haven't been exempt from those disruptions. We've had our own fair share of disruptions. Carlos, if you could just advance to the next slide, please. So some of those disruptions, are still very fresh in our mind. We think of the civil unrest that happened about a month ago, and the impact now, and not only the 15 billion rands worth of damage that has been caused, but certainly the lack of confidence and the thinking of, well, what does this mean for your business, your supply chain, where you put your manufacturing and your warehousing facilities, and how you're going to run your inventory going forward. Equally, we've had the national border lockdowns as a result of COVID, not being able to trade with our natural trading partners around us. And then equally, the lockdown on liquor and tobacco and the knock-on effects. And who would have thought that the humble pineapple would have become such an important part of our life during lockdown and liquor ban situations. And, on tobacco as well, we're very fortunate to have Alexandros on the call with us today. He'll be sharing some of the initiatives that they've been taking. But equally, we've had the tobacco ban in South Africa as well. We haven't escaped our fair share of floods, fires, droughts and storms, and particularly in the agri space, that's hit us. And then our own cyber attacks. And when I talk about our cyber attacks, I'm not talking about the very first big one that impacted all of us when Garmin went down and we were all petrified if we're going to hit our discovery goals or not. I'm actually talking more importantly about the cyber attack on Transnet and the ports and the shutdown of the ports, and even BCPs going to manual weren't giving the opening up the ports and created congestion and pushed back either into our supply chains here or creating a shortage of products within the supply chain. So those are some of the real, and interestingly enough, with all these disruptions, we're starting to see that Asia to Europe, the cost of shipping is up tenfold. There's a shortage of containers out there. Toyota, for example, is shutting down, I think, some 14 of its production plants because of a shortage of microchips. So all these disruptions are very, very real and impacting us, and it's how we deal with these disruptions going forward that's important. Carlos, if you can just advance the next slide, please. So that scary picture of 2021 painted, leaves us all looking with great trepidation to 2022. And as you can see in that cartoon there, and how right that is. Everybody peering around a corner, opening the door with a broomstick because of the uncertainty. And what that actually means to me is that the companies who start to plan for disruptions and how to deal with the disruption and make the decisions correctly, or the right decisions, and quickly, because a lot about these disruptions is how quickly you respond, but not only how quick you respond, have you responded knowing that you made exactly the right decision given the disruption, given the circumstances, and given the multitude of options and sourcing options that are available to you. And it's those people who respond to those disruptions well who will be in business going forward. And the ones who don't have a thought around responding to those disruptions, whose business sustainability could be compromised. So with that teeing up, I'm going to hand over to my good friend and colleague, Mr. Carlos Centurion from Revelogics. Carlos is woken up extra early. So Carlos, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on this topic. So good morning, and over to you, Carlos.
Thank you, Carsten. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear, Carlos.
Okay, thanks. And good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be with you today. So to follow on Carsten's introduction, indeed, the future looks pretty daunting when you consider that these disruptions are very likely to continue, if not intensify, in the near future because of all the events that are going on on a global stage. A key consideration of this is that they're not just supply chain disruptions. They actually affect the whole business on an end-to-end manner. You can see there that any of these impacts are hitting products, are hitting customers, your financial policies, and so at the end of the day, they are supply chain events, but they have a much broader implication, which means they're really important, and it's really important to understand their impact on the whole company metrics. So one of the questions that we had is, are companies just going to accept the impact and kind of wrestle with it the best way they can, or some of them are actually looking at this as an opportunity to establish a competitive advantage. You're going to hear how Philip Morris has done that later in the presentation. But before we get there, let's take a peek at an example. So within RiverLogic, we have lots of clients that are dealing with these issues. And after some research, we developed a sample case, sort of a blueprint, company impacted by COVID and also some of these other disruptions that have come along. Again, one of the things that you're going to see is that it's a company matter. It's not just supply chain, but supply chain is at the heart of it. And so it's an opportunity for supply chain to drive more impact. But, what is being impacted? So first of all, we see lots of clients, lots of companies where they have issues with material availability. That obviously raises the question of, the immediate tactical question is, where can I get the material I need and where do I ship it? That seems tactical enough and manageable until you start adding some of the other things that are changing. So demand is changing and it's changing differently in different locations. That raises a more fundamental question. What do I make with the material that I can get? And which products and customers are going to be impacted? Where can I make more money on the margin? Is that important? How do I balance against my strategic customers? So now you start to get more fundamental. The next thing that happens is, or has been happening, is the foreign exchange rates are fluctuating differently than before. And they're impacting your prices for your end product, but they're also impacting your cost, and in different ways as they keep moving around. So it's important to understand not just the material, the impact on demand, of demand on your business, but all of a sudden now your fundamental costs and prices are moving around. We saw with CARSTEN that there is a lot of impact on transportation. And so can you even get your product where you wanted to get to within the lead time that's acceptable? Or do you need to look for alternatives? Can you get your materials in? That's part of material availability, but it's again a different problem. And finally, labor. Labor has not been shielded from this. There's lots of companies that are suffering because they can't get enough labor, and that affects not only what products you can make, but where you can make them, how soon can you make them. And at the end of the day, the questions that your CFO and your CEO are going to ask obviously are, which of these options that you have now are going to maximize your financial metrics. The reason they're asking that obviously is, when you get to the company level metrics, that's where you're talking about your company valuation and your company's ability to deploy resources to continue to drive competitive advantage, growth, and profitability. So how does one deal with these challenges? Let's look first at how companies are dealing with it today. The sort of typical approach that we see when we go into a company, when we talk to Gartner, the normal approach, it's siloed, and it's really not adequate to deal with the challenges and the speed at which the challenges are coming and the complexity that they're driving, because they're all coming together, they're affecting your whole business, not just one piece. So why is the typical siloed approach inadequate? There's three primary reasons. There's probably a longer list, but these are the important ones. One is that they typically work in a sequential process. So oftentimes, you sort out your demand, then your supply, then your financials, and even within the supply, there are multiple steps. And your visibility is really limited to the current step. So what you don't know is if you're making a commitment in the current step that's going to hamper you down when you get down the planning pecking order and create all of a sudden either a lot of rework or you're just not going to see it. And so the sequential nature is necessary because processes are complex, but it introduces a big limitation. The second one is that there's a lot of tools. Each tool solves one problem or two problems typically very well within that realm. Assuming your business is stable, that's okay. But at the end of the day, you end up with multiple underlying models that try to represent your business. Each one of them making an assumption about what is good for the business, what is actually feasible to achieve. And so, a typical example would be a transportation tool is going to try to minimize your mileage, and a manufacturing tool would maximize your throughput. But neither of them is telling you, for example, that maybe I need to run overtime and incur extra miles because I can make a product mix that would be more profitable. At the end of the day, when you try to answer these more holistic questions, you end up driving a lot of work for your planners that are trying to true up the assumptions, move data around. That drives errors, pushes into late nights, and it slows down the decision making. The final point is that there's typically a limited amount of intelligence. A lot of these approaches that exist today are derived based on human intuition and rules. Those are good and they work very fast in a stable world. But when the world is changing, you need something more powerful that can understand what are the objectives that you have and how do you best meet those objectives, considering an underlying economic model that is sound. What we find typically is that the economic assumptions that underpin these, mostly disparate tools tend to be mostly broken. And there is a false sense of security there in the company because they think that the underlying economics are sound, but they actually are not. So at the end of the day, the question is this the approach that people want to go forward with, given the complexity of the challenge, the complexity of your business, and the fact that you need a really good reaction fast? So we propose a different approach that's based on the concept of a digital twin used for planning. So a lot of people have probably heard of the digital twin that is more transactional in nature, that's kind of real-time tracking what's going on, has a map of the asset base underneath. There is a different version of a digital twin that is used to look into the future. And this twin represents your business on a forward-looking basis. So it has a slightly higher level of aggregation, but it's much more end-to-end. It actually includes a lot of complexity around your demand, your products, and the financials. And as such, is able to see into the future and very quickly reflect the impact of different events or strategies in the form of plans and what-if analysis. And it translates the impact of these events into not only the operational impact, such as your fill rate, your capacity utilization, your mileage consumed, your inventory, but also on the financials. So you can sit down as a company and very quickly run what-if analysis in a fraction of the time that it took before and make a lot better decisions. So I'm going to hand off to Alexandra's next, and you're going to see how their digital twin analyzes over 50 million options every time they run a scenario to recommend the best path. And that is the power of this thing, is that it brings it all together and it really drives up agility.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you. I'm going to pick up and start from the word disruption that CARSTEN took us a little bit forward in the beginning of the presentation. We have started our disruption in our business about 5 years ago, on top of what came through COVID and all the other parameters that were discussed before, where we went and took a decision to switch from what we considered combustible cigarettes to a smoke-free future. Now, this meant introduction of new products, completely new to what we had in our portfolio in the past, in leveraging what was different science and a different technology. Now, already year to date, we have 67 markets in just 5 years since we first moved into this declaration. We have already 67 markets where our product IQOS is commercialized, with close to 15 million adult smokers already switching to it, and almost 30% of our global net revenues coming from these products, with the aspiration that by 2025 we have half of our total net revenues coming from that direction. Now, this happening in where we are today, from 5 years ago and going to the next, up until 2025, all this creates a big disturbance in our traditional way of thinking. And that's where the big transformation in a way of thinking came, by putting extra pressure in a global manufacturing footprint, which comprises about 40 different sites globally, which are PMI owned, and about 28 different sites which are belonging to third parties. And they cover the total need in about 175 markets globally. So switching from what was the conventional products, which traditional, let's put like a cigarette, to what are the new products that we're putting in, coming on top of our existing footprint, of our existing manufacturing capabilities and the existing distribution, but having completely different channels, completely different manufacturing and supply processes. This put a lot of stress in our traditional and legacy systems. Historically, we were doing all our work based on Excels and SQL databases. So we were simulating the entire world and the entire concept purely from an operational point of view, where we were loading the factories with volumes, producing, satisfying market demands, and we knew that the business was pretty stable. So we knew that there was a decline, which could be planned for, and year on year, we could see the loading of a factory with the different formats, the different capabilities, and of course, always with the aim to satisfy the customer needs in terms of volumes and delivery. However, as I mentioned, things have changed. We wanted something to also be much more long-term. In the past, we were doing these exercises, once a year, looking at the next, 15 to 18 months period horizon in a program that we were calling OVF, or Regional Volume Forecast. And this was happening once a year and updated, let's say, perhaps once more within the year. But now we start realizing that with the new products coming in and with the growth that you have seen, we need to have something much more dynamic, which can have solutions and to simulate the scenarios in a much more frequent base than what we had before. We needed to have something that every quarter could simulate our network and see what are the disturbances, what are the growths, what are the new volumes, what are the new product introductions, what are the issues that we need to have. And also we wanted a plan. So in the past, we knew our network, but now we need to know when are we going to need to invest in one location with new equipment in order to satisfy demand. Where are we going to supply a new market and from where? All these questions, and obviously at the optimal cost, yeah? So all this started to put a lot of stress in the whole process, and we needed something new. And that generated the need for a digital twin. And we went out in our thinking by having some enablers. And the first one is we need to be able to accommodate frequent changes. As I mentioned, we need to run a system that will give us fast results and as frequent as we want, without going to a need of putting 5 people working down for a month to simulate things and come back with only a single viewpoint. And then if we had a change in 1 or 2 or 3 parameters, we need to put again the same people in the stress of the process to recalibrate everything. We need to move more to a long-term planning horizon, as you see, number 2, with operational and financial dimensions. We needed to know what are the impact of a decision, and we needed to move to something which is data-based. And what I say data-based means that we can actually go in the future and project and see what is the best approach backed up with data, and not with, I believe this is the best thing to do. We need to have a lot of what-if simulations. So even before COVID, options that we had is, let's see if there is a lack of materials in one place. What does the system tell us as optimal solution? If suddenly one factory cannot produce, what happens? If one line in one factory cannot produce, what is the best economical alternative that we have for the company? If there's a delay in some of the activities, if there's an issue in one country, how do we do it? Or if there is a new shipping route, and what is the best duties that we can have in order to supply the market. We wanted this to be powerful and to be easy for our users in order to be able to have the user experience that would accelerate the use rather than say, oh yes, this is another tool in the plate. And finally, of course, we wanted to unlock financial opportunities, do a step change in what was before. Now, the results are in two ways. What we're expecting out of that is, first of all, overall to know the implications in our global value chain in the new norm in the future. And what does that mean? That we wanted to be able to simulate what happens if, for example, there is a disturbance in one location, where would we be able to solve? It started going a lot down towards the BCP area. So planning, understanding our network, understanding our capabilities, stretching our limits. What happens if volumes suddenly go much higher than what we need to do? What's going to happen? What if volumes are lower than our predictions? What is going to happen again? So these things actually became that we needed to understand. And that's why for us, the digital twin became a second digital reality, let's put it that way, to help us find out, learn, and escape what I call the highest person paid in the room opinion, and go into something which is much more factual. The second one was to be fit for the future, so that we know already what are the implications of an issue that may come into the future, and what is the best way to be prepared as far as possible in order to be resilient. So that's the two uses that we found as results, let's put it like that we wanted to get out from this twin. Now, did we stay in words? No, we have actually implemented it, and it actually runs. So implementation was focusing, first of all, on having the digital network and the global flow implemented within our tool, within RiverLogic tool, but also to do the change management inside our organization on the how. Because if we focused only on the what, our objective just to install the software, in the end, this would be a failure. We had to change the way we work internally. We had to adapt our processes to ensure that we do the right stuff. And we had to go through a change management process to enable this to happen. And here you see a snapshot of our model. It goes from the purchase of the raw material, it captures the machines, it captures the factories, the floor space, it captures the semi-products that we need to have there, it captures the demand, and at the end of the day, it shows us as well where do we have infeasibilities and where do we need to invest in the future. And that happens now, not for a period of 18 months that I mentioned before. It happens for the entire 10-year period. And for the first 3 years, at a monthly level, at the click of a button, we have our answers. And that is where the strength comes. And our people, instead of spending time on data crunching, Excels, in all that area, they focus a lot more now in the value-added activities, and we put people more into our resources. And moving on to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits. And here, I will spend a little bit more time. The benefits that we saw come in two ways. The one is increased efficiency. And then at the second level, we're also enhancing our effectiveness. Now, if I go back to what I mentioned before, if we were to install only the software itself without the internal change management support, we would result into having something which was inefficient before becoming more effective. So we would simply increase our inefficiency. We did not want that. That's why we put the change management in the process, and you see the results come here. If I take first the speed, something that, and here I'm talking about a new study. I'm not talking about creating the new model run, A new study which, management or senior management will come to me and say, look, Alex, I just need, for you to examine X, Y, Z parameters. In the past, to set it up, to collect the data, to ensure the data is correct, to create the models, to run it, to investigate if the models were correct, to simulate, to go back to the stakeholders, to prepare a presentation, and go back to senior management, That was something that would take, let's say, a week. Now, in less than 2 hours, we run RiverLogic, we get our outputs from the machine, we have the capability through our user interface even to create automatic, slides presentation. So something that took, that long now takes much, much less. And we have reduced by 90% almost the Excel files going around and flying around. We only have 70 Excel files which are needed to fit the model. Now, you may say it's too many or too little, but the number of the inputs depends on how far you want your model to be going into depth. Now, at the end of the day, it gives us the most powerful result. That was the powerful of the tool. It gives us the optimal result out of 50 million options, where in the Excel, we could not even dream of doing that, even with the most powerful solver that we have found and we were using before. The second benefit came that is insights. Insights because, first of all, as I mentioned before, we have a factual base for going in direct decision making. It's not anymore the opinion of a leader, and it's not anymore of someone saying, I foresee the future in my gold ball to be like this. Yeah. Now we have that. We have facts to actually talk about it. Then at the second time, for every scenario, we have a dollar impact. We don't talk about only, yes, this will improve by 5% our uptime. We have factual data to go into that way. And it's done on a roadmap of 10 years. So we know at what period of time we need to invest or what to do in order to implement. And we're ready for BCP. In terms of COVID, we were just, when we knew that there was going to be a closure in one of our factories, we were just clicking on the factory saying disengage, don't use, keep it out of the equation, and then automatically we run the models and we knew what would be the sourcing options in the most preferable way, and then of course we take things to the next step. In terms of business performance, the payback that we had was, in terms of a couple of days, gave us 600 million of opportunities that were identified over a 5-year period. We looked at footprint and sourcing optimization, and also we optimized significantly our cash requirements, our working capital requirements, both in terms of inventories and also in terms of CapEx for going forward. Finally, what I mentioned before is we reduced the department size looking at the modeling activities based on what I told you before by 65% over a period of almost 2 years. At the same time, we doubled our delivery. We doubled the things that we do. So, and the people that were reduced were focused on new projects, new activities. So we actually increased furthermore in other areas our efficiency and productivity. So at the end, we're focusing on value-adding activities rather than going to the data process and every time looking into the details and wasting a lot of our time, energy, focus, and frustration sometimes, if you wish, in data-related issues. So overall, the effectiveness got improved because at the same time, we learn, we get prepared for the future, and at the same time, we optimize our network to have a positive P&L impact. And this is a never-ending circle because we find the best way that something that needs to happen for the company and to deliver the best value, and also for us to be prepared for the future in the most possible way, of course, that exists in terms of resilience in our supply chain. Now, that's a little bit of the benefits and the overall picture. And now moving to the next slide, I'll pass it over to CARSTEN to tell you a little bit more about the digital twin approach and the uses behind it. So thank you from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Alexandros. Appreciate the insights. As always, very insightful. Thank you. So, effectively, what I'm seeing here is that by implementing a digital twin, one, you're able to manage risk within your business, disruptions, and how quickly you can respond to those disruptions. But from what Dr. Alexandros has been saying and what Carlos has been saying is, over and above the risk management side of the business, an investment in a digital twin in your business has further benefits and opportunities which extend beyond the risk side, such as capex, investment policies, where production capacity sites, market demands, cost to serve, all those additional items. So, to me, it makes absolute sense to be investing in a digital twin, especially where you have got scale and complexity within your business. And certainly, the instances where we know it's been very successful, and in the industries, and if any of you find yourself in these industries, such as the mining industry, and you've got CapEx planning to do, the forestry industry, where you're looking to link the price of lumber right through back to which compartments you need to harvest and which mills you send it through, and optimizing that process, your capacity planning within fast-moving consumer goods. I know that digital twins are also successfully used in the medical world, as well as in the asset planning world. So I know in the UK, Yorkshire Water and a couple of the other utilities there are using digital twins to do capacity planning for the next 30 to 50 years, to decide, where to build reservoirs, when pipe networks need to be replaced, etc. So I think the benefits are far-reaching. So just beyond the risk side. And then I think if I sum up, I think there's 5 key points, that one take 5 key takeouts from the digital twin side. Carlos, if you wouldn't mind just to advance. So the first part is, no doubt, in the global economy, supply chain disruptions are here to stay. They're the new normal. The future's not what it used to be. Call it what you like. I think disruptions are going to be here, and we've got to learn how to deal with those disruptions. There are obvious strategies that have historically been used, such as, just holding more inventory or shortening supply chains, i.e. buying locally instead of globally. Do not always take the full account of the business. So it's quite linear. It's, I'll just hold more inventory. I'll throw cash at the problem. I'll throw working capital at the problem. And that, you've got to ask yourself, is that the answer in terms of the best impact for the business? And as Carlos pointed out, most companies use silo-based approaches. So pockets are considered and pockets are optimized, but not the entire business impact on the income statement, the balance sheet, the risk of the business, inventory holdings, etc. And you're really, through a digital twin, wanting to create that entire visibility across that. So, an effective supply chain resilience plan relies on unified data sources and the ability to model different scenarios and, importantly, the trade-offs in as short a time as possible. And it's those companies who can start to react quickly in that short period of time that you've got to a perceived or an actual disruption that are going to be in business going forward. And the ones that don't have that ability are going to be struggling. And I think, in short, the closing message is, if ever there was time for a consideration to create a digital twin to de-risk your business, I think now is that time. And with that closing comment, I'm going to thank you all for your interest. I'm going to thank Carlos and Alexandros for their great participation and for joining and sharing their thoughts. Carlos out of Athens and Carlos out of Texas, and Alexandros out of Greece. So thank you for you joining. And then, Tonya, I'm not sure if any questions have come up. The panelists are open to field any questions.
So I have no questions as it stands now. So I'm waiting in anticipation for them to come in. It was a great presentation. I think lots of practical information, not hard to digest at all. So there's no reason that people wouldn't have understood it and have questions. However, we are hoping for some questions to come in. I really like the part where you talk about being fit for the future. So it's kind of, if you think about yourself and you go to the doctor and he says, "Oh, you've got a heart condition, you need to do X, Y, and Z," you are going to change the way that you live and the way that you do things. So why would it be any different for your organization? We know that the change is there, that we know that the future is unpredictable. So you can't keep doing things the same way you've always done them. You've got to kind of embrace the change and start putting these things into place. Risk, definitely, yes, but doing what else you can to improve the business. And the simulation approach is really, really, really good, because that way you can kind of play out different scenarios and see what is going to work for you with the best fit solution. So I really, really enjoyed that, and I'm waiting for questions. I guess this is what you get. Okay, hold on. Here we go. How long does it take to establish a digital twin?
So, Carlos or Alexandros, any take?
Look, I can mention in our case, installing or having the tool or the model ready, that can be done extremely fast. So, we had a first model working for one region done, in a couple of, maximum weeks to set it up in that way. And then we had the POC done in a couple of months. And then the big work starts, the internal change management, the expansion, data collection. It all depends how well you have your data collected before. In our case, we struggled, and I'm being very honest and humble about it. But, we started getting data which had the commas and the dots and the spaces and the attributes. So it all depends how, well also you are set up internally. But it doesn't take that long.
Normally we try to establish a sort of a 3 to 6 month timeline to get a V1 in production. And what we do is we manage the scope with the clients so that they have a roadmap, because the important thing is to get something in use. As Alexandros emphasized a little bit, the need for change management, and so nothing like a live tool that has been validated by the business that is being used with a roadmap attached to it, so you can add more things over time. But we do try to get within that sort of 3 to 6 month window as much as possible.
Thank you. That's reasonably achievable, I think. Oh, I'm getting feedback now. Okay, here's a question for you. The case study was very valuable. Approach out of the massive data and speed with which this can be processed.
Tanya, if you wouldn't mind just to repeat that question. Certainly on my side, you froze for a few seconds.
It's quite possible. This technology is a little bit questionable. Okay, so the case study is very valuable, but how does one make sure that one gets to the right data and selects the approach out of the massive data and speed with which this can be processed? I think the question's lost me at the end a bit. Okay, let me go to the next one.
I can have a quick stab at that. So,
okay.
Before one embarks on developing a digital twin, you really got to get through developing your modeling strategy, and the modeling strategy will start to determine your data requirements. And I'll give you a very simple example. Are you modeling in daily buckets, in weekly buckets, or in monthly buckets? Are you modeling at a category level, or are you modeling at an SKU level? And then are you modeling down to town, or are you modeling down to territory? So a lot of it is determined in terms of your modeling strategy up front, which will determine your approach to developing the model, and that will then inform the data that you require and the format of the data that you require. I hope that answers that question.
And I will furthermore strengthen that by saying that it's also very important to define what's end-to-end in each of the model case. So where does it start? Where does it end? In our case, it started from the raw material intake and finished at the first delivery warehouse in each country. So that's an important step as well, to define what's the end-to-end of the model and what's the span accordingly.
Thank you. I have another one here. Once a digital twin is established, is it feasible for a business to maintain it internally, or does it need specialist support externally?
So that's a good question, Carlos. Come in if you want to. So certainly the initial establishing the digital twin, I would advocate get external help. The way that digital twins are typically set up, the environment is created, and there's normally a front end within which the users can interact. So from that point of view, the users would have a portal to access the digital twin and to interrogate the digital twin on type of routine environments. You could get to a point where a super user is then trained up on the digital twin to actually work within the model and make appropriate changes, or alternatively, one can contract in terms of some type of a bureau arrangement with a service provider to offer that service for you.
Yeah, these digital twins are highly data-driven.
Sorry, I lost a bit of that. My internet is jumping up and down here. Does that answer the question to the person that posed it? Oh.
I think Tonya, Carlos wanted to add something.
Okay. Sorry, I'm missing bits of the conversation. Please, Carlos, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the digital twins are very data-driven when they're implemented. So the range of scenarios that they can support and the questions that they can analyze is very, very broad. So we see that there's quite a ramp of use in terms of clients discovering everything they can do once they have one live. And we've certainly seen both some clients deciding to go the external route for continuing tweaking of the digital twin, and some that prefer to do it in-house. It is very much a code-free drag-and-drop platform, so it can be learned. And it's just, the preference is more of a business choice for each client.
Okay, here's a comment. Thank you. The data aspects have been answered, but it does seem an area of challenge and opportunity at the same time.
I would say that the data is usually, that and change management are the challenges. The technical bit is pretty straightforward. And the interesting part about the data is that since a digital twin is as smart as what you teach it to be, so you're essentially teaching it about your business, and then you're asking it questions that it can help you answer. So the more data that it has, the more it knows about different parts of your business, the more powerful the answers are. But you can do that over time. So you're right in a sense. The data is a challenge, but it's also your biggest opportunity. If you figure out, for example, how to use data around demand in a good way, your answers are going to be way more insightful than if you're just looking at, for example, within the supply chain.
Okay, that does. Sorry, I have some activity in the background here. I think that one of the things that COVID and this disruption has taught all of us is that you need to change the way that you think, and you shouldn't be hesitant, and you really do need to embrace that next step. And as much as you talk about challenge and opportunity, I think, you've got to embrace the challenge as the opportunity and move forward. I don't think that we can sit back anymore and just, carry on the same way. We've got to start doing these things. We've got to start embracing them. And take the leap and get it done. I don't know. I mean, is this? I mean, we talk about how long it takes and whether we need external consultants to do it, but what is the type of manpower that you need for a project like this in terms of the customer? So how much manpower does it require from them? And obviously the change management thing is always an issue. It doesn't matter the project that you're involved in. If it doesn't get the right support, it's never going to work. So how much time does the customer have to invest in getting something like this set up?
Look, I can tell it from our side. There is not a golden rule that would say you need to spend so much time, etc. But I would say that this is something that we need to take. I mean, we need to take it seriously during the implementation. And what I mentioned before, that it's not just about taking a software, installing it or running it and using it in that way. We need to invest some time to do it in the right way, to think first what we want to get out of it, what are our limits, what are our scopes, how would the model be set up so that we, together with the tool, we set up the solution. And that requires effort. If we don't place any effort or place limited effort, I think Carlos highlighted very well that it needs a support grow. It needs a top management commitment. It needs the change management within the organization in order to be successful. Now, this doesn't mean that it requires so much effort that everything else stops, but indeed it requires effort to set it up rightfully, be it external effort or internal.
Yeah. So Tanya, just in terms of the word twin, I think the analogy can also be brought towards children. And, you know, when you're creating a digital twin, it is almost like having a child. You've got to continue investing it, feeding it, and keeping it alive to get the benefit out of it. It's not a once. You can do a once-off event to ask a question and get something back. But the best value you'll get is if you keep your digital twin alive. So, you know, to what Dr. Alex was saying is you really, you know, create the environment, you continue to update the data, and then you can interrogate the data. What you should avoid doing is answering a once-off question and then leaving the data for 18 months and then trying to re-upload data after 18 months. So it is like having a child. It is something you should commit to as a business, and make sure that the model is kept current, because that allows you to interrogate the model as things change in your environment, to get the right answer out, and then to quickly act on the right answer.
Okay, that clarifies that. Thank you. I think it is going to be a wrap. So, are you guys going to be around for a little bit longer, or?
Yeah, well, I'll certainly be around a bit longer. But yeah, so if there's anyone who wants to reach out, absolutely.
Okay, so there are tables in the lounge, so if you want to take a seat there. Alternatively, if anybody wants to get in touch, we've got all their contact details. We can put you in touch for further discussions. But I thank you for your time and your efforts in putting the presentation together. Andreas, Alexandros, shall I say, sorry, for your last-minute participation. It was great to have you here with your insights. And it's always great to have you guys back here. So we will look forward to some more insight from you at the next conference, which we hopefully will be in person. But have a super afternoon further. Thank you for your time and for your support of SAPEX.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you to all the delegates, and thank you to my co-presenters. Appreciate all your input and time as well.
Absolutely. There's a virtual round of applause coming through. There you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you all very much.